By linking plot progression to player failure, Hades has changed game design forever. Hades is a video game made by Supergiant, released in 2020. The story concerns Zagreus, the titular son of Hades, who just so happens to be the god of the underworld. Zagreus is determined to escape from the underworld to reunite with his mother and the other Greek gods of Olympus. So the player must help Zagreus battle his way through the circles of hell, fighting a variety of ancient mythological characters along the way. Hades is enormously popular, with universal acclaim on Metacritic, overwhelmingly positive reviews on Steam, and it was the winner of multiple Game of the Year awards, as well as being the first video game to win a Hugo Award. Because of its massive success, it's worth asking, what makes it so special? While the full answer is, of course, everything. Every little detail in the art and the design of the full product. Still, broad analysis can highlight some unique characteristics that makes Hades stand out from the rest. From a distance, it's hard to see what makes Hades so special. In general terms, it's a roguelite, which, in short, means it's reminiscent of the 1980 game of the same name. This means certain elements of the game are randomly generated, such as game maps, enemies, and powers. More importantly, every time you fail, all of your progress is lost and you go back to the beginning. As Hades is a roguelite though, unlike the original Rogue, even if you fail, you acquire lasting improvements that make you stronger, helping you to get closer to completing the game. There are plenty of similar games that do this, like Dead Cells and Rogue Legacy. Where Hades sets itself apart is its rich and rewarding story. That's not to say the other games don't have stories, but Hades delivers its narrative in a very clever way. You see, when you fail in Hades, it's not just your combat skills that level up. You also get the chance to use what you gained in the previous escape attempt to enhance your relationships with the other characters in your starting base. These characters might then have an impact on your next escape attempt, creating a relationship where a circle of failure is necessary for progress. As such, failing in Hades doesn't feel like a failure as much as it does an opportunity to enrich your place in the game world by unlocking more of the story. To give just one example, throughout the story of Hades, it's possible to develop into a deep love triangle with the characters Thanatos and Megara, but wooing these characters can only be accomplished by first fighting against or alongside them, before repeatedly lavishing them with gifts you acquired from your repeatedly failed attempts through the underworld. This requires the player to continuously fail in their journey through the underworld, returning to the House of Hades to take time to converse with the characters and build the story world. It's hard to state just how much this differs from standard game design. If I started just listing games, I'd be here forever. Instead, I want to draw on some broad categories of games suggested by one of the foremost theorists of games, Jesper Juul. In his short book, The Art of Failure, he divides games into three main categories: games of skill, games of chance, and games of labor, before discussing how failing in these games is very different. Failing in games of skill is the most straightforward, as Juul states. We come to a game with a repertoire of skills that we try to apply to the problem at hand. Whenever we fail, we have the chance to reconsider our strategies, to recalibrate or expand our skill set. Failing in a game of skill is generally regarded as fair because the failure resulted from us lacking something that can be acquired through further practice. By comparison, failing at a game of chance is entirely dependent on random outcomes, with no possibility of getting better or reducing chances of failure through practice or effort. This is why games of chance are essentially regarded as gambling and are frequently made legally restricted. The last type of games of labor, are those where progression is entirely dependent on spending time playing the game. A pure example of this is the excellent parody Progress Quest, where the only control you have is the button to quit the game. Everything else is automatically taken care of in an endless process of leveling up. Losing in these games is simply a case of not spending enough time playing. While Juul discusses many different types of game, in his discussion, failure is almost always seen as something negative, even if only partially. We can see this even in roguelite games like Dead Cells and Rogue Legacy. Even though failure is basically a requirement in these games, the player is still punished for failing and loses progress. The implication is clear. You should have succeeded, but didn't. There are shades of this within Hades too, but it breaks the mold by making it not only a functional necessity for the player to fail repeatedly, but also essential to narrative progression, to the point that it's something to actively look forward to. Losing in Hades isn't a big deal because you're always getting stronger, moving forward in the story. In doing so, Hades transforms games of failure and repetition, an essential part of gameplay, into a constant forward trajectory. Rather than being a loop, like most games, Hades is a spiral. Hades showing game players and developers that punishing the player is not a requirement of failure has implications that reach far beyond just video games. This is largely because the traditional view that players must be punished for failure in games has made its way into numerous other forms of media. This phenomenon, known as gamification, means that job interviews, workplace fire safety quizzes, and especially interactive films have introduced gameplay loops with right answers and wrong answers that punish users for curiosity or ignorance. Think about Duolingo. You're given a set number of hearts and a set number of questions to answer. Each incorrect answer costs you a heart. You're punished for failure, with too many failures costing you access to the app. If we start thinking like the designers of Hades, we can imagine an entirely different version of Duolingo. One where we would instead start with 0 points and earn them through each failure. Every time we'd make a mistake, we'd be rewarded with more explanations, more vocabulary, and more examples to actually help us learn. This would allow users to break free from the spiral of failure that comes from a traditional view of games. Of course, it's important to acknowledge that Duo knows exactly what he's doing. The free model is using a negative reinforcement model that threatens to punish failure by disabling the app as a way to lure you into the paid version, which in turn uses positive reinforcement to create a Skinner box feedback loop of engagement. So, while Duolingo's use of gamified elements might seem crude, it's actually working on multiple levels. Ultimately, this is the reason Hades is so important, because there are still so many games, apps, and films that aren't like it. There's a popular belief that failing in a game must be met with punishment. This has always seemed odd to me, as players know they've failed, which is already punishment enough. The progression of a narrative medium is determined by the means with which we can tell stories, and until more games start weaving the inevitability of repeated failures into their narratives, we're going to stay stuck in a loop. If you're a game designer, try to imagine other ways to deal with a player failure than punishment. And if you're a player, demand more from games that don't allow you to explore every option. If you've watched this far, thank you so much for watching. It means the absolute world to me. I can't believe some people actually do watch my videos. It's really humbling and nice, though. Thank you so much. A couple of things to say. I know that there are so many games out there that do this as well, and that maybe do things better than Hades. There's one game in particular that I think maybe does this better than Hades, but I kind of want to see if anybody can tell me what that game is in the comments. Get annoyed at me. If you think that there's a game that did this before Hades, that Hades isn't that big a deal, please just tell me. This is just my opinion, and it's an opinion that I share with students, so if it's wrong, I need to be corrected on that, and people need to learn. So, as I say, thank you so much for watching. Keep making these. If you want me to say anything, just let me know. Thanks a lot.